In 1999, the children's network Nickelodeon was changed forever with the premiere of a new cartoon series named SpongeBob SquarePants. Nickelodeon had developed many popular TV shows in its 20-year existence, but it had never had a hit like SpongeBob. The show debuted to high ratings, with an audience comparable to Nickelodeon's biggest series at the time, Rugrats. But SpongeBob found massive success in an area that other Nickelodeon shows hadn't: merchandising. The company had purposefully shied away from extending the brand too far from the network itself. While Nickelodeon had turned some of its properties into toys, feature films, and video games, they feared that too much merchandising would contradict the brand's goal of appealing to young audiences. Nickelodeon was supposed to appear as a network run by kids, for kids, and the executives believed that children could tell when they were being advertised to, thus interfering with the channel's primary objective. On top of this, a general distaste for the Walt Disney Company and its practices had solidified Nickelodeon's motivation to limit size and avoid feeling corporate. All of this was thrown out the window after SpongeBob premiered. The potential profit from merchandising the show's characters and setting was too large to ignore, and the title character would turn into Nickelodeon's unofficial mascot, its own Mickey Mouse, within just a few years. It appeared as though Nickelodeon was cashing in, but they were still concerned with expanding outside of their comfort zone and tarnishing their brand. In lieu of building its own stores like Disney, a type of project that was deemed too risky, Nickelodeon instead licensed its properties to anyone that wanted them. If you could slap a SpongeBob sticker on it, then Nickelodeon would sign a document that legally allowed you to slap a SpongeBob sticker on it. And since they were already beginning to look like their main competitor, why not act like them too? And what's more Disney than rushing into a huge, difficult project fueled by temporary success? Welcome to the Nick Hotel. Going up? On October 9, 2003, Nickelodeon announced that they had formed a partnership with the hotel chain Holiday Inn for the purpose of transforming its Orlando resort, the Holiday Inn Family Suites Resort, into the first ever Nickelodeon hotel. The property was less than 5 years old, having just opened in the summer of 1999. The resort was Holiday Inn's first all-suite hotel, featuring 800 suites, 2 pools, water playgrounds, a restaurant, and a food court. The hotel was located just east of the Walt Disney World Resort, and transportation was provided to all 4 Disney parks. Nickelodeon had originally considered constructing a new resort themselves, but decided against this due to their constant fear of failure. Orlando was of course the perfect location for the resort's pilot test. It had a huge tourist population of families and young children, and the company had 2 attractions at Universal Studios Florida, Nickelodeon Studios and the newly opened Jimmy Neutron's Nicktoon Blast. The Holiday Inn was located closer to Walt Disney World than it was to Universal Studios, but Nickelodeon would take what they could get. During the announcement, Nickelodeon revealed that they had plans to build 4 more resorts throughout the country. The transformation of the Holiday Inn Family Suites Resort was to be completed in early 2005, and the renovation would cost an estimated $20 million. Nickelodeon began advertising the resort leading up to its release, and parents began to book their stays at the new hotel.
Did you hear? Nickelodeon has built a hotel just for you. Opening this Memorial Day, the brand new Nickelodeon Family Suites by Holiday Inn in Orlando, Florida. You get your own bedroom, 2 humongous pools, slides and flumes, a giant arcade, character breakfast, and live Nick entertainment. Parents can book reservations by logging on to www.nickhotel.com or call 1-866-GO-TO-NICK.
On March 9, 2005, the Nickelodeon Family Suites Holiday Inn, commonly referred to as the Nick Hotel, opened its doors. Guests would walk up to the bright orange resort, with characters peeking through the window of the main entrance. This led to the lobby and check-in desk. There were 4 room layouts that guests could choose from. The first was a 1-bedroom suite designed for 1 to 2 people. This included a king-sized bed, full kitchen, and a dishwasher. The second was a 2-bedroom kids suite. This included a private parents' room, a living area, a bathroom, and a themed kids room. The kids room would either feature a bunk bed or 2 twin beds, and the rooms were themed to different Nickelodeon properties, such as SpongeBob, The Fairly Odd Parents, Jimmy Neutron, Dora the Explorer, Rugrats, Danny Phantom, and more. Guests could request a specific character room and would be assigned to it if available. The kids' rooms also featured a television, and some came with a PlayStation 2. Guests could rent games from the hotel for $5 or bring their own. There was also a CD player and an activity table in most of the suites. Unlike the parents' room, there was no door separating the kids' room from the living area. This was due to a county law restricting doors on kids' suites for safety reasons. The parents' room was unthemed and featured 2 side tables, a closet, a 25-inch TV, and a makeup desk. The main living area featured a pull-out couch, a rocking chair, a dining table, and a 25-inch TV. The third suite layout was a 3-bedroom kid suite. This came with 2 private parent rooms, both with king-sized beds, a themed kids room with a bunk bed and pull-out cot, a full kitchen, a full dining room, and 2 bathrooms. The fourth and final layout was Nick Hotel's honeymoon suite, called the Nick at Night Suite. Oh yeah. This included a heart-shaped whirlpool, mood lighting, scented bathroom shower, an extra-large shower,
Shower for 2, baby.
and only 1 private bedroom. For some reason, these rooms didn't last very long, and it seems that they were discontinued within a few years of the hotel's opening. All suites had the option of a wake-up call from a Nickelodeon character, and simple room service was available. The suites opened from the outside, resulting in the kids' suites having no windows. 14 6-story buildings housed the suites. The main structure comprised of 9 buildings, enclosing the lagoon pool, and the other 5 buildings enclosed the Oasis pool. The main area also featured the lobby, the fitness center, and Studio B, which was a space for special events such as conferences, birthday parties, and starting in 2009 for inexplicable reasons, weddings. The lagoon pool featured a basketball court, mini golf, a pool and a kiddie area, the Lagoon Bar and Grill poolside restaurant, and a large water park. The main attraction for children staying at the resort. The water park featured large cutouts of Nickelodeon characters, multiple water slides, water features, and a large water bucket at the top of the structure. This would periodically fill up, tip over, and douse guests with water. And at certain times of the day, the water would be colored green to simulate slime. This was treated as a special event, with hotel employees gathering everyone and getting them excited for the mass sliming. The Oasis pool area featured another poolside bar, a kiddie area, a spa, and a less elaborate water park. This was supposed to be the more relaxing area than the often crowded lagoon pool. In between the 2 hotel structures would be a building referred to as the mall. The mall featured an arcade, a kids spa, and a gift shop, which sold both Nickelodeon and Universal Studios merchandise. There was a 4D theater, which had a 3D screen, moving seats, bubbles, and water effects. This would show a SpongeBob 4D film, as well as 15-minute highlight reels from recent movies, such as the Ice Age franchise, and later, Pacific Rim. There was also a theater named Studio Nick for game shows and live character shows. When the hotel opened, Studio Nick had 2 game shows, Who Knows Best and Nick Live. Who Knows Best was a game show that tested how well families knew each other, while Nick Live was a show in which families would compete against other families in physical challenges and trivia, with the winner getting slimed. A smaller scale version of this show called Nick Live Poolside would be performed by the Lagoon Pool, with a small dunk tank dedicated to the show. The Nick Hotel also had a wide array of dining options. The mall had its own food court, with restaurants rotating in and out from time to time. Restaurants included A&W, Pizza Hut Express, Antonio's Pizzeria, and Starbucks. There was a buffet open for breakfast and lunch, an adult bar named the Nick at Night Lounge, and the hotel's signature restaurant, the Nicktoons Cafe. This reservation-only character dining restaurant served a breakfast and dinner buffet. The main appeal of the Nicktoons Cafe was, of course, the character meet and greets.
And now, a brief tangent on Nickelodeon character costumes.
The Nick Hotel allowed guests to meet many of their favorite Nickelodeon characters. There were meet and greets set up throughout the hotel, Studio Nick character shows such as SpongeBob Live, and dance parties in the pool area. The art of turning a 2-dimensional cartoon into a 3-dimensional walk-around costume is underappreciated. If done correctly, it can bring a beloved character to life. If done incorrectly, it is creepy. Today, Disney's walk-around characters rarely come off as unsettling. This is because of the talented actors that portray them, the brilliant artists that design them, and years of trial and error. Nickelodeon did not have the benefit of the latter. All of the Nick Hotel character costumes seem to be designed in such a way that the characters appear as though they are always smiling for a picture. However, this only works if they are staring directly at the camera, which they almost never are. On the other hand, Disney's costumes are designed to be multi-purposed. For instance, when Mickey is smiling for a picture, he will tilt his head up slightly. By design, he appears to be smiling more from this angle. When he tilts his head back down, he is still smiling, but it is more neutral, as opposed to relentless and terrifying. Also, most Disney costumes are designed for some amount of neck movement. This gives the characters more life, as they don't appear as walking sculptures. Many of Nickelodeon's costumes featured heads that were too large to move. This resulted in a surplus of premium-grade nightmare fuel. Made worse if the children actually did have a nightmare, they would turn on their bed light to reveal the character staring at them while they sleep. In short, every character at the Nick Hotel looked like they were on drugs at all times. Characters appearing at the resort included SpongeBob, Squidward, Sandy, Patrick, Mr. Krabs, Dora, Boots, Diego, Blue, Danny Phantom, Aang, Cosmo, Wanda, Jimmy Neutron, Angelica, the Power Rangers, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Millie and Geo of Team Umizoomi, Ming Ming Duck Ling, Fanboy and Chum Chum, Chase and Marshall, the Paw Patrol dogs, Pablo, the Bubble Guppies, and Little Bill. The costume designs improved over time, but they were still not optimal for character shows.
But Squidward, today is the day that we honor the greatest sandwich in the 7 seas, the Krabby Patty.
Behind the mall, there was a man-made lake. While it was not accessible to guests, various statues of Nickelodeon characters were placed on it. The hotel also had Christmas festivities named the Let It Snow Celebration. The resort was decorated in bright Christmas lights, and it offered hot chocolate and s'mores around fire pits. Many of the walk-around characters were dressed in seasonal costumes, and there was a special Studio Nick character show called Celebrate Nickmas. So, how much did it cost? The renovation to create the resort ended up costing around $25 million, and a total of 777 suites were available to book. Prices fluctuated throughout the year. A 2-bedroom kid suite cost between $135 and $275 a night, while a 3-bedroom kid suite cost between $300 and $600 a night. The buffet was around $10 for adults, $8 for kids, and free for anyone under 12. The Nicktoons Cafe character dining cost $17 for an adult and $10 for kids. An all-access wristband in later years would allow guests access to the 4D experience and other activities in the mall area. This cost around $20. So if you did the math, a family of 4 spending 2 nights and a full day at the hotel would cost over $750 during peak season. While this was expensive, the Nick Hotel operated as a resort, with enough activities and attractions to keep guests on property during their stay. This was different than Disney, as more often than not, Walt Disney World Resort Hotel guests will be purchasing tickets to one or more of the property's theme parks. On April 30th, 2005, just over a month after the Nick Hotel opened its doors, Nickelodeon Studios at Universal Studios Florida closed. A time capsule had been buried outside of the studio in 1992. Kids voted on what they wanted to be placed in the capsule, and items such as a Back to the Future VHS, an MC Hammer CD, and a Nintendo Game Boy were buried. The capsule was to remain for 50 years, to be opened in 2042. After Nickelodeon Studios closed, the time capsule was moved to the Nick Hotel where it was reburied and displayed for guests. The Nickelodeon Hotel continued to operate normally for over a decade, adding new entertainment options and shows periodically. In May of 2012, Double Dare Live, a new game show at Studio Nick based off of the hit TV show, debuted. In 2014, the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Summer of the Shell began. Some rooms were rethemed to the heroes, and a laser maze based off of the TV show was added to the mall. In 2015, the Nick Hotel celebrated its 10th anniversary, but just a month after the celebration ended, the Nick Hotel would receive some devastating news. On January 29, 2016, Nickelodeon announced that the Nickelodeon Family Suites would be rebranded back into a Holiday Inn. The news, while sad for many, was not necessarily shocking. There were a few signs that the Nick Hotel might not be around for much longer. For one, Nickelodeon had a severely reduced presence at Universal Studios Florida, since Nickelodeon Studios had closed in 2005 and Jimmy Neutron's Nicktoon Blast had closed in 2011. While walk-around characters still appeared at the park, there was no attraction dedicated to Nickelodeon. This made marketing the resort and the park together slightly more difficult, and more than anything, it was an indication that an era of Nickelodeon was over. By 2016, the original branding was dated, as all of the shows, except SpongeBob and the Fairly OddParents, had ended. Another issue was that the concept for the resort was flawed from the beginning. The Nick Hotel operated like an all-inclusive resort, similar to those found in tropical destinations. The problem was that the Nick Hotel was in the middle of Orlando. This made guests feel claustrophobic, as the resort was not sitting next to an ocean. They also wanted to go experience Orlando's many attractions. But for the price of the Nick Hotel, guests needed to stay on property to get their money's worth. However, these were all minor issues. The biggest reason for the debranding was Nickelodeon's new partnership with Charisma Hotels. This was created to build Nickelodeon resorts throughout the world. The company had never gone through with the plans for expansion with Holiday Inn, most likely due to the Nick Hotel not being a massive success. The resort was popular, but it was clear that the Holiday Inn concept wouldn't work outside of Orlando. The first Nickelodeon resort with Charisma Hotels would open in Punta Cana in the Dominican Republic later in 2016. The new resort would have many attractions similar to the Nick Hotel, but it had a more elegant and subtle design and was located on a beach. The Punta Cana resort was met with glowing reviews, and another resort is set to open in Riviera Maya, Mexico in 2019. Since Nickelodeon was focusing on a more luxurious resort brand, they decided to end their licensing contract with Holiday Inn. There was also one more reason for the closure. The hotel was not in great shape.
The Nickelodeon Hotel, 10 years later. These images may be disturbing.
By 2016, the Nick Hotel desperately needed a renovation. This meant either updating all of the Nickelodeon characters and properties, or removing them completely. The timing just happened to be perfect to end the contract. The resort was to receive a $30 million renovation along with the rebranding. It was set to reopen on April 17, 2016. However, construction delays pushed the project back nearly 2 months, having been announced in January that it was to close. This put the Nick Hotel in a state of limbo for 5 months, and the hotel stayed open for most of the transformation. During this time, certain activities were discontinued, buildings were being repainted, and logos were being removed. The time capsule was once again dug up and moved to the Nickelodeon studios in Burbank. Less people were staying at the hotel during this time, and the resort felt abandoned. Many of the themed kid suites remained, despite the rest of the hotel being given a blue paint job and replacing all Nickelodeon logos with Holiday Inn. Many of the TVs and appliances had not been replaced since the hotel opened. The mall area was almost completely silent, with many of the attractions and restaurants being renovated or removed. Finally, on June 1, 2016, the resort reopened as the Holiday Inn Orlando Suites. The hotel still hosts family game shows, the food court reopened with some new restaurants, the water bucket is now dyed dark blue at certain times, the 4D theater now shows some generic movie, the laser maze is now themed to Batman, and the gift shop now sells both Nickelodeon and Disney merchandise. The prices have also dropped significantly, now typically below $100 a night for a room with a kid suite. The Nick Hotel was an interesting experiment to say the least, because it didn't not work. Attendance was consistent, it wasn't completely neglected by either company, and it avoided what would have probably been a disastrous expansion. At the same time, it wasn't perfect. The design was cheesy, the activities were immature, and there was little to nothing for parents. Plus, Holiday Inn, known more for having economical prices rather than luxurious facilities, was probably not the best choice for the partnership. Nickelodeon made the right decision in partnering with Charisma Hotels, and it is possible that many new Nickelodeon resorts will open in the future. While these new resorts best the Nickelodeon family suites in almost every category, it is still disappointing to see such an elaborate entertainment experience disappear. Seeing the debranded hotel, a skeleton of what it once was, is devastating to those that stayed there and the many more that wanted to. While it might be gone, the Nick Hotel leaves behind a decade of memories of Nickelodeon fans having the best day ever.
Slap. Duel 2. Let's rock. 仇討ち是非なし阿鼻二天のホース
We've got a newcomer.
Amusement and theme park rides are often divisive. What is beloved by one fan might be despised by another. There are endless debates on whether any given ride is good or bad, thrilling or uncomfortable, fun or boring. But every now and then, the stars align and a majority opinion emerges, and fans, critics, and casual guests alike all come together in their shared love or hatred of an attraction. And in Six Flags' case, there is no coaster in recent history that has been so widely rebuked as Magic Mountain's Green Lantern First Flight. On May 29, 1971, Magic Mountain opened its gates. The park, located in Valencia, a neighborhood of Santa Clarita, California, opened with 38 listed attractions. Of those, 3 were created by Intamin, a Swiss-based ride designer and manufacturer that had opened just a few years prior. Another designer and manufacturer, the California-based Aero Development, famous for its contributions to Disneyland, would provide 4 rides to Magic Mountain, including the park's signature coaster, Gold Rusher. This, combined with the Bradley & Kay Little Dipper Kiddie Coaster, meant that the park would only operate 2 coasters in its first year. But this would soon change. Over the next 3 decades, the park would gain an additional 15 coasters, lose 3 of them, for a grand total of 13 by 2000. This put Magic Mountain, which had since been bought by Six Flags and renamed to Six Flags Magic Mountain, in striking distance of Cedar Point. Amusement parks thrive on records. It is almost a requirement for parks to have at least one ride that can boast being the tallest, fastest, longest, or first of its type. But the record for the most coasters in a single park is an especially coveted title. Six Flags Magic Mountain announced in late 2000 their intention to add 2 additional coasters, bringing Magic Mountain's total to 15 and beating out Cedar Point by 1. One of the rides would be a record-breaking Vekoma boomerang named Deja Vu, and the other would be a coaster unlike anything on Earth. Aero, which had become Aero Hus and then Aerodynamics, now had 3 coasters operating at Six Flags Magic Mountain, and they were partnering with the park to create a one-of-a-kind coaster, using a design patented in the mid-90s by John F. Mayers, an attorney that apparently just patents coaster designs in his free time. Aero and Six Flags Magic Mountain set out to build the first ever 4th dimension roller coaster. A 4th dimension coaster is characterized by the addition of a horizontal axis, in which the cars can turn and spin guests perpendicular to the track. This can create additional inversions, or even keep guests upright as the vehicle inverts. Aero's coaster, designed by engineer Alan Schilke, used 4 rails rather than the standard 2. 2 rails would keep the train on the tracks, and the other 2 would use a rack and pinion gear to control the spin of the seats. So while the coaster would appear to spin freely, the rotation would be controlled and the same for every guest as the train made its way along the track. The coaster was an innovative concept from Aero, who had lost significant ground in the industry since their heyday decades prior. The coaster, titled simply X, or sometimes Xtreme, was planned to open in the summer of 2000. But this would not be the case. Design issues and miscalculated construction costs would delay the build months, with previews taking place in December and the ride finally opening on January 12, 2002. The ride would put Six Flags Magic Mountain at 15 coasters, 1 more than Cedar Point, awarding Magic Mountain the coveted title. However, the ride's debut was not the celebration that it should have been for Aero or Magic Mountain. Aero lost millions on the coaster. The unique design was supposed to put them back on the map, but it instead forced them into bankruptcy. On top of this, Six Flags' frustration over the delays and mechanical issues led them to sue Aero, which was the final nail in the coffin for the company. Meanwhile, Magic Mountain was doing their best to keep the attraction operating through constant mechanical issues, which caused delays in opening every day and multiple downtimes. The dispatch rate of the unique design was slow as well, and wait times could be as long as 5 hours. The reception of the ride itself was generally positive, ignoring these inconveniences, but it was clear that the ride was not functioning correctly. In early June of 2002, after only 6 months of operation, Magic Mountain closed X for repairs. In the meantime, Cedar Point was able to win back the title of most coasters operating in a single park, with their addition of Wicked Twister. This would be brief, as X would be up and running again in August, resulting in a tie between the two parks. Aero and its assets would be sold to the Utah-based manufacturer S&S, which created S&S Aero to continue the company's legacy. However, S&S seemed to be only interested in the fourth dimension coaster, and using X's design, S&S Aero would build the world's second fourth dimension coaster, named Ejinika, at Fujiku Highland in Japan. This coaster had a few design differences that fixed many of the issues of X, which was still struggling at Magic Mountain. After years of issues, delays, downtimes, and even periods of closure for maintenance, Six Flags bit the bullet and revamped the ride. In December of 2007, X closed for renovations, opening back up on May 24, 2008 as X2 or X Squared. A new color scheme, new effects, new trains, and critically, a new loading system was implemented. X2 operated more efficiently and was better received by guests. Despite all of the issues with the initial fourth dimension coaster, the promise of the concept did not go unnoticed. Rival manufacturer Intamin began designing their own fourth dimension coaster in the mid-2000s, debuting their version, named the Intamin Zackspin, in 2007. Two Zackspins were created, Kirnu at Linnanmäki in Finland, and Inferno at Terra Mítica in Spain. Despite being fourth dimension coasters, giving riders the ability to flip on a horizontal axis, there were significant differences between Intamin and Aero's design. First, the Zackspin's track is laid out vertically, resulting in a very small footprint and compact design. Second, while X2 had 7 cars to a train, with 2 guests on either side of a car, and all 28 guests facing the same direction, the Zackspin had a single vehicle, with 4 guests on either side, 2 facing one way and 2 facing the other. This resulted in difference number 3. The axis of the rotation was not centered to the riders, rather it was centered to the car. And finally, and most importantly, the Zackspin models were free spinning. While Aero's designed predetermined rotations, Intamin's varied depending on weight distribution. The first 2 Zackspins were rather short in length. In 2009, a slightly larger Zackspin in Grönalund in Sweden, named Insane, would debut. 2 years after that, Intamin would create a 4th Zackspin, identical in layout to Insane. This would be the first Zackspin to debut in North America, and it will be located at none other than Six Flags Magic Mountain. On October 20th, 2010, Six Flags Magic Mountain announced the addition of 2 new coasters, a relocated kiddie coaster from Six Flags New Orleans, and a new Zackspin themed to the Green Lantern titled Green Lantern First Flight. Six Flags, which used to be owned by Time Warner until 1998, still had a close relationship with the Warner Brothers movie studio, holding the long-term licensing rights to many of their classic characters and DC Comics heroes. The new ride would take this synergy one step further, as the new Zackspin was set to debut at the same time of the Green Lantern film starring Ryan Reynolds, which was scheduled to open June 15, 2011. This was somewhat appropriate, as both would be received similarly. Green Lantern First Flight would be located in the westernmost section of the park, which at the time was named the Gotham City Backlot. It would be renamed to DC Universe to accommodate Green Lantern's addition. The ride would take over a small section of land that at the time held trees, lunch tables, and a Gotham City statue. Construction began in early 2011 and continued into the early summer. However, the ride would miss its opening date, being delayed 2 weeks past the movie's premiere. Testing began in June, and there were a few kinks to work out. In reality, this was probably just caused by someone not tightening the lid on the water test dummies. But never ignore an omen. The ride had the same specs as Insane. It was 107 feet tall and reached speeds of 35 miles an hour. It was celebrated as the first ever completely vertical pattern zigzag roller coaster featuring 360-degree spinning seats in North America. What took them so long? Most importantly, for marketing, it was a record-breaking coaster, technically. The coaster itself broke no records. As aforementioned, it was a clone of Insane. However, the existence of the coaster broke arguably the most important record, which is, of course, the most coasters in a park. Green Lantern First Flight would be the park's 18th coaster, beating Cedar Point's 17.
Now with the most coasters on the planet, go big. Go Six Flags Magic Mountain.
This was just in time for Magic Mountain's 40th anniversary, and the park touted that they now had the most comprehensive collection of thrilling coasters anywhere in the world. A media event was held for the ride on June 30th, 2011. The grand opening ceremony was star-studded. Aquaman was there, Wonder Woman was there, and of course the Green Lantern himself was there, in brightest day, in blackest night, in spandex that hide nothing from sight. The following day, the ride was open to the public. Guests would approach the ride, viewing the coaster, a large Green Lantern power battery, and a large Green Lantern illustration. They would pass under a sign for Ferris Aircraft, where courage takes flight, the fictional aircraft company where Hal Jordan, the Green Lantern himself, was a test pilot. They would pass by a model of a plane and more information on Ferris Aircraft. As guests entered the Q building, they would be met with Ab and Sir's wrecked starship. The next room would feature a Green Lantern power battery and a pre-show video of animated Green Lantern illustrations. Next, they would be greeted by a sign featuring the Green Lantern Oath. The line would then be split so that guests could board on both sides of the track. Guests would be seated 8 to a vehicle, 4 in each car, with 2 passengers facing forward and the other 2 facing back. The ride began and the spin was unlocked, giving riders their first preview of what was to come. They would lock in position as guests began their ascent, resulting in guests climbing the lift hill at a number of angles depending on weight distribution. Guests would then brave the 107-foot or 33-meter lift hill before beginning their zigzag descent along the 828-foot or 252-meter track. The most intense section was the final element, which whipped guests up and over a steep curve before locking the cars upright and returning guests to the boarding area. Guests would exit the ride on the backside of the Q building. The entire experience was about 60 seconds. Reviews of Green Lantern First Flight were generally positive out of the gate, and fans and critics praised the coaster as an intense and thrilling addition to Magic Mountain, compacting some of the unique experiences of X2 into a small footprint. Some critics were underwhelmed, calling it a glorified flat ride. But overall, reviews were good. The ride had a maximum capacity of around 800 people an hour, but Magic Mountain almost always ran the attraction with fewer than the maximum amount of vehicles, resulting in the capacity being closer to 500 an hour. Guest demand for the small coaster was not as overwhelming as the larger attractions, but it seemed the Green Lantern First Flight was a solid, thrilling addition to Magic Mountain. However, guests' opinions were about to do a 180. As it turns out, Zack spins are much more about the spin than the Zack. It was reported that the maximum amount of 360-degree rotations the free-spinning cars on Green Lantern First Flight could accomplish was 3, with the minimum being 0. But many reported in the early months accomplishing 4, 5, or even 6 spins. The amount of rotations depended on the weight distribution of the car, and reportedly, how much the cars were allowed to spin. The latter rumor purported that there was a friction mechanism that the park or ride operators could control, so while the cars would still be free-spinning and capable of 360-degree rotations, the amount of force necessary to make a full rotation could be much greater depending on this setting. But this has not been confirmed. Weight distribution, on the other hand, definitely plays a huge role. Supposedly, ride operators in European parks where the other 3 Zack Spin coasters resided make an effort to maximize the number of rotations by purposefully picking heavier riders and pairing them with lighter ones. Of course, Six Flags would not make the same effort, resulting in varying ride experiences. Fewer rotations leading to a less thrilling ride was not even the real problem. The biggest issue was the experience that fewer rotations could cause. Not only is going upside down fun, but on the Zack Spin's intense zigzag descent, it is often necessary to avoid whiplash. Cars that are inverting with the curves of the track have the force of each sharp turn distributed more comfortably. But if the car remains upright the whole time, riders are violently pushed, pulled, raised, and dropped, banging around in their restraints, defeating the enjoyment and purpose of the ride. Plus, as previously mentioned, Zack Spins placed guests off the horizontal axis in which they spin, exacerbating the whiplash effect, as each guest is essentially catching up with the movement of the ride. The restraints were also less than comfortable, with many guests complaining of pain in the shoulders and, in some cases, hits below the belt. To put it delicately, it was a pelvic nightmare. This tainted the ride for many guests, but the complaints were minimal during the ride's opening months. It wasn't until early 2012 that the ride would develop its reputation among coaster fans and regular guests as one of, if not the worst Six Flags coaster in operation. Through late 2011 and early 2012, the ride experienced a few breakdowns, leaving riders either facing the sky or upside down for an extended period of time. This was either a prevalent issue or something Six Flags wanted to avoid entirely, as an adjustment was made to the ride's design to prevent this from happening. The vehicles, which prominently displayed fins that appeared in the formation of a throwing star, were given additional metal, filling in the gaps, resulting in a solid structure. Reportedly, this weighed the vehicles down and significantly reduced the amount of possible rotations. And after this change, riders reported a much worse and much more painful experience. Some called the ride neutered, fitting considering that others began reporting that this is what the ride did to them. This is not merely to engage in the immature humor of the classic low blow. The only ball busting going on here was that of the ride. The reports of crotch botches plagued the ride's reputation. The ride was advertised as an attraction capable of, quote, squeezing a lifetime of action into 90 seconds. but many writers claimed after the change that it only squeezed one's ability to make a life out of them in 90 seconds. The ride's bad reputation would only grow throughout the years, and a palpable hatred was brewed. In July of 2014, Green Lantern First Flight and all of the Intamin Zaxpins were closed out of caution after an 18-year-old man died after falling out of the Inferno Zaxpin in Spain. It was soon revealed that the park had modified the attraction's restraint without the knowledge of Intamin, and the other Zaxpins were reopened. The following year, a new fourth dimension free spinning coaster would open at Six Flags Fiesta Texas named Batman the Ride, but this would not be developed by Intamin, rather SNS Aero, which had since been acquired by Sansei Technologies. The company had built one additional fourth dimensional coaster in X2 style at China Dinosaurs Park, named Dino Conda, but this would be the last of its kind that SNS Sansei would develop. Batman the Ride was similar to a Zaxpin, but different in a few key ways that solved many of the problems that Intamin's design had. First, riders were separated into cars of 2 rather than 4, and the axis was centered on the seats, more specifically the riders' stomachs, resulting in a more comfortable experience and a somersaulting effect. Second, the cars use a magnet and fin mechanism that allowed for forced spins in key areas, while allowing free spinning during the rest of the ride. This concept, again designed by Alan Schilke, was a huge success, and a total of 9 SNS free spins had been installed throughout the world. To compete, Intamin announced a new generation of their free spin model that shared more than a few similarities to SNS's version, although so far, none have been installed. As fourth dimension coasters spread throughout the world, Green Lantern First Flight continued to disappoint. The amount of negative reviews for the attraction cannot be overstated. It was truly despised by many, while there was a minority of people that enjoyed the attraction and thought everyone else was not tough enough for it. Many more Magic Mountain visitors actively avoided the ride. And then suddenly, in July of 2017, Magic Mountain closed the coaster, giving no explanation as to why. Rumors circulated that a woman had hurt her back on the ride and was suing the park, but nothing official ever surfaced. In early 2018, trim brakes were installed, leading many to believe that the ride was just being modified for reopening. However, this was not the case. The ride remained closed for the rest of the year. In early 2019, Magic Mountain guests noticed that the ride was being tested. However, this time the rumor was not that the ride would reopen. Rather, the coaster was being tested before it was to be sold or moved. This most likely was the case, as it was soon revealed that Le Ronde, a Six Flags park in Montreal, Quebec, Canada, was to receive the ride, which would be renamed Viper. Six Flags Magic Mountain's official reasoning for removing the coaster was to make way for new development. No progress has begun on the area, and the queue still remains intact. The coaster was dismantled in late 2019 and transported to Le Ronde, where it was to open in 2020, but the COVID-19 outbreak has indefinitely delayed the ride's opening. Green Lantern First Flight's replacement was rumored to be an RMC Raptor single-rail coaster. Plans were filed with LA County, but the park's closure, also due to COVID-19, will postpone and potentially cancel these plans. Luckily, the removal of Green Lantern First Flight would not affect Six Flags Magic Mountain's title of the most coasters in a single park. More coasters had been added since Green Lantern First Flight's debut, and Magic Mountain now has a 2-coaster lead over Cedar Point, with Magic Mountain at 19 and Cedar Point at 17. Although many fans would argue quality over quantity. Green Lantern First Flight was about as universally hated as a coaster could get. It was not without its fans, but the majority of guests seemed to agree that it was not worth the whiplash. Most disappointingly, the ride was received well before the modifications. It is possible that the coaster could have lived on with a much different reputation if Six Flags had not made the change. It is not often that the removal of a ride of any kind is cheered, but if there's a silver lining to be had, unsuspecting guests will no longer be subjected to the pain and whiplash caused by Green Lantern, so long as they don't watch the movie.
Duel 1. Let's rock. Duel 2. Let's rock. Slap. Duel 3. Let's rock. Slap. 仇討ち是非なし阿炎二天のホース千里成敗おか